takes a minute to start. Okay, and now record here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Monsoon seminar today. Our speaker today is Sudhir Bhadra. Sudhir works for the Indian Institute of Technology in Bengaluru, and he did his PhD at the National Institute for Oceanography in Goa. And he's going to talk to us today about his work on oceanography and monsoon. So, Sudhir, would you like to share your screen? And I just want to remind people, put your questions into the chat and I'll call on you at the end to ask your question. Or if you're feeling shy, I'll ask for you. But Sudhir, please, you can start anytime you like.
Thank you. I will start now. Yeah. So
that's great. Everything looks good.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. I am Sudhir Bhadra. I am working as a postdoctoral fellow at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And I will be talking about the Indian monsoon variability during the Pleistocene and how its strength varied, and we have used planktic foraminifera as a proxy for this. So a lot of things about monsoon has already been talked about in the last 2 years. So many people, so many talks have been discussed about this. I won't go into much basics of Indian monsoon system. What I will instead focus on is how the Bay of Bengal acts as a much better or acts as a good basin for the paleo monsoon studies. So going into that, so here we can see. So here you can see that the Indian monsoon winds affect to the Bay of Bengal and Andaman, Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea different during different months, but the variable wind stress is similar in both the basins. So if the wind stress is similar, what is making the Bay of Bengal a much unique basin compared to that of Arabian Sea? So so when we look at the winter season, we see that two major currents, two important currents here. One is Western Indian coastal current and another is Eastern Indian coastal current. And the Eastern Indian coastal current flows southward in the winter, whereas it flows to the northward during summer. So transporting much of the high salinity Arabian Sea waters towards the Bay of Bengal. But when we look at the salinity, January and March, in winter's time, we see that there is a large variability in the salinity, and Bay of Bengal salinity is very low compared to that of Arabian Sea, and it is because of the high amount of freshwater influx that is coming through the many rivers flowing to the east coast and flowing to the Bay of Bengal. And when we go to the summer time or the summer monsoon time, even the salinity becomes more low. So if the freshwater influx is affecting salinity, what else it is affecting? It also affecting the depth of the mixed layer and the sea surface temperature. This picture is just for representation purpose. So we see this one is Prasanna Kumar et al. By Prasanna Kumar et al. 2002, and we see that between Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, the mixed layer depth varies a lot, whereas the Bay of Bengal mixed layer depth is much low compared to that of RFNC. And specifically during the monsoon seasons, I have marked those in light yellow. And the same happens to the sea surface temperature as well. Further, these freshwater influx also brings a large amount of nutrient to the basin. And these nutrients, let's look at the silicate, is much more in the summer monsoon season because of the high amount of rainfall it's carrying. And same happens with respect to nitrate and as well as phosphate also. When so much terrestrial influx is coming, it is increasing the sedimentation rate also. So sedimentation rate increase is an advantage for paleoclimatologists because more sedimentation rate will give us more high resolution studies. So here if we see the RFNC and Bay of Bengal, and the Bay of Bengal sedimentation is much higher compared to the RFNC. Even these two figures by flow setter show this how much is sedimentation varying between both the basins. So considering all of these, I have compiled a record of what paleoclimatic studies have been carried out in the Bay of Bengal. This is not updated, like it might miss 2 to 3 recent studies, but except that all of the studies have been compiled. And what is the main thing we notice that there has been scarcity of long-term records. And more of the long-term records, it's more important because it doesn't cover the mid-Pleistocene transition, which is a very important climatic transition that affected global climate as a whole. Though some recent studies by the Clemens et al. 2021, they have extensively talked about that. But overall, the studies are scarce. So we utilize the samples from this area 353 site, IODP site 1446. So this is my sample location. And wanted to look how the monsoon is changing throughout the last 1.45 million years. So before you look into that and you utilize planktic foraminifera as a proxy, we also wanted to know that how the planktic foraminifera assemblage is behaving in the modern times. So for that, we collected 100 samples throughout the western Bay of Bengal. And we collection purpose, we use core and multi-core and subsampled on board. And I have only used the top 0 to 1 centimeter of all the cores. And we did we did the planktic foraminiferal picking, and we see that there is a planktic foraminiferal abundance is more near the upper slope region and in throughout, and more near the Ganga, off the Ganga, and also near the Kaveri. So this low abundance in the shelf regions can be attributed to many things. It could be because of dissolution, or it could be because of high dilution occurring because of huge terrestrial influx, or it could be because of low productivity also. We'll look into why it is happening so. So, but one interesting thing, if you had noticed, this is the phosphate graph I showed that. So it could be a possible reason also this here, and this abundance could be because of high amount of silicate coming from all the freshwater influx. Then we wanted to look at different species abundance, and we see that we actually identified total 30 species. But the dominant number of species were 6, which were this glutinata and this rubber, bulloides, and siphonifera and deuterated. So I will be talking about each 6 and sacchariferol. So here if you see glutinata is mainly considered as a cosmopolitan species and also prefers high nutrient conditions. And if you see bulloides, it is mostly abundant during the, towards the coast. That narrow zone, which the upwelling occurs in Western Bay of Bengal, though this upwelling is not comparable to, means not much that compared to the Arabian Sea, but there is upwelling happening, and that's why Bullard's awareness is more. When you go to the deuterate, it's mostly considered as a neoglyphocorona deuterate, thermocline dweller, and thermocline dweller, and it will prefer low temperature and high nutrient conditions also. So what is happening here is that it is more abundant because of the deep chlorophyll maxima. That is a process that happens in the Bay of Bengal, and I'll talk about that in the next slide in more detail. And ruber and sacculifera both are preferring high temperature and salinity conditions, whereas the siphonifera, it is mostly abundant near the river mouths. So it is more tolerant to the freshwater fluents. We did canonical population analysis, and we compared the species population with respect to the parameters. Here the vectors are that of parameters. The vectors are actually placed with respect to the species, and they themselves don't relate to each other. So keep a point on that. So here we see that I talked about deuterate. Deuterate is showing a negative correlation with that of a temperature of the thermocline, that it prefers low temperature. But what is interesting is that it's showing a negative correlation with the salinity mixed layer. So most of the previous studies, they have observed that they have been reported that it is a low salinity tolerant species. But since it is more of a thermocline dweller, its relation to the mixed layer salinity doesn't make any sense. So what must be happening in Bay of Bengal is that those low salinity layer in the upper ocean creates a gap and creates strong density stratification that inhibits the nutrient to come to the surface. So a high deep chlorophyll maxima is created. That's why the deuterate is more, showing the negative correlation to salinity. When you go into ruber, as we discussed in the previous slide, so a high temperature and high salinity condition preferred. And Minardi is showing opposite relation to temperature of the thermocline, and showing a positive correlation with the salinity of the thermocline. Then we wanted to know, before going into the paleoclimate studies, that how the planktic foraminiferal abundance is getting preserved. That means in the previous slide, when I showed that the planktic foraminiferal abundance could be because of many reasons. It could be because of dilution, it could be because of dissolution, and also the productivity as well. So here, when we do it with depth, we see that there is a decrease in planktic foraminiferal abundance after 1,000 meters. And that decrease is significant. And this low values in the shelf region is attributed to more dilution due to terrestrial influx. So for the further dissolution studies, we removed these samples from the shelf, considered shelf as 150 meters. And we wanted to look at the more depth regions if the dissolution is happening or not. So we first looked at the dissolution, traditional dissolution susceptible species, and we see that though some of them show a correlation with the depth, the decrease with depth, but most of them don't. And though we at the same time see that with dissolution resistant species as well. Here also we see that a deuterate and is showing a good, means increasing with depth, but other dissolution, traditional dissolution resistant species like obliquloculata and falconensis don't follow that trend. So that indicates that these species might represent more of the ecological condition rather than the dissolution happening. So what we did, we combined, we wanted to look at the fragmentation indexes out. So if they are showing any change at 1,000 meters, and we see that 3 fragmentation indices we used, and we see that all 3 of them have very low p-values and show a significant change after 1,000 meters. And this is Bhadra dissolution index, which takes into account of that ranking of a dissolution ranking of a species as well the species abundance as well. So all of them show a increase after 1,000-meter water depth. So we also combined the dissolution, all the dissolution resistant species and all the dissolution susceptible species, and took a ratio of that. And this here shows a much clear picture that this is increasing after 1,000-meter depth. And their R and P values also similar with the fragmentation index ones. So we later took a canonical correspondence analysis to know how these species and these indices are behaving with respect to the different parameters. And we see that the fragmentation index proposed by Lay and Shackleton shows a more significant correlation with depth compared to other, but all the indices, dissolution indices, show a positive correlation with depth, that indicating that dissolution is actually happening in the deeper depths. But why it is happening, that we will discuss. And one thing to notice is that they all are showing a negative correlation to ski-og and positive correlation to dissolution values. We plot all the representative dissolution indices, TRV, DSA, fragmented index, with that of the different parameters. We see that here there is one we took ski-og by sea carbonate, which represents more of a high productivity. A high value can represent high productivity or better preservation, both, or a action of both. So when the organic carbon is decreasing and this one is increasing, so it more points towards more a better preservation of productivity and preservation options. So when this is increasing, so dissolution is happening. So it could be because of another thing, which is the high productivity can lead to more organic matter, and more organic matter could lead to more respiration of, and more bacterial respiration will make the surrounding water carbonate unsaturated, and that could make the dissolution happen. And this here is a schematics of that only. We have low biogenic calcite dissolution at the depth, and that could be because of the high productivity as well, and also because of the increase in depth as well, which is a like solubility product related to solubility product. There is another thing also. Recent study found a methane seepage, much of methane seepage in the deposing in the Bay of Bengal, shallow waters of Bay of Bengal, and these methane seepage are mostly between 800 meter to 2,000 meter. So methane seepage again could make the carbonate and surrounding water carbonate unsaturated. That also could result in a dissolution of the foraminifera or the calcite. After looking at this, then we again come back to the question: the foraminifera is actually representing dissolution, preservation, or productivity. So we plotted the planktic foraminifera abundance with in the core samples with respect to the Del 13C leaf works that published by Clemens et al. And rubidium by calcium value. Here, as usual, you can see that most of the influx of is during the interglacial times, and that can be visible from the Del 13C of leaf works also. But when you look at the planktic foraminifera value, it is increasing during the stadial periods, the cold periods, and decreasing during the interglacial ones. So that indicates that the planktic foraminifera in general, or at least specifically in the Bay of Bengal, is more dependent on the, indicates more preservation and less dilution, rather than it indicating a more productivity or nutrient flux. So in the core samples, again, we looked at different species, and we also use those species as summer monsoon and winter monsoon assemblage, and eutrophic and oligotrophic assemblage. Those species are glutinata here, and Siphonophora. All of these species show a good stadial interstadial variability, and some of these species continuously increase from this MIS 30 around towards present, and we'll discuss that in the next slide how it is. First, we compared that of our monsoon assemblage, summer monsoon assemblage, with that of summer monsoon stack published by Clemens and Prell in 2003 in the Arabian Sea, and it gives a good match. Though that stack is only available till 350, we compared that is giving a good match, and we wanted to use it for this, for our the rest of the ages. And what we see here that first, let's look at the summer monsoon assemblage. What you see here that most of the peaks, not like almost all the peaks, large peaks are during the interstadial periods. Here you can see, and the low peaks are during the stadial periods. At the same time, if you look at the winter monsoon assemblage, and the high peaks are during the stadial periods, and the low peaks are during the interstadial periods. So that indicates that in the quaternary period, the summer monsoon was strong. Indian summer monsoon was stronger during the stadial times and weaker during the apology. The summer monsoon was stronger during the interstadial times and weaker during the stadial times, whereas the winter monsoon was stronger during the stadial times and weaker during the interstadial times. When we plotted the G bouloides, in the previous slides, we saw that bouloides is indicating upwelling in the Bay of Bengal. So upwelling only happens in the Western Bay of Bengal during the summer monsoon. This also is showing an increase during the interstadial periods and a decrease during the stadial periods. That also supports, when we look at the SST data published by Clemens et al. Also, that also is more during the interstadial periods. And because the high summer monsoon and rainfall will create more stratification, water column stratification, and that will result in a temperature, warmer temperature in sea surface temperature also. But more we see here on that in the longer term, the summer monsoon start increasing from MIS around from MIS 32, and it increases continuously till present. Whereas that is not the case of the winter monsoon. The winter monsoon gives more cyclically, but after MIS 12 it start decreasing till the present. The same can be seen in the bouloides also. So what we propose is that the summer monsoon continually strengthened during the post-MPT period, that is post-mid-Pleistocene transition, whereas the winter monsoon weakened. We look into the productivity changes it brought also. So here we use the eutrophic abundance, and we see that the same thing, more abundance during the more abundance during the interstadials and less during the stadial periods, means cold stadial periods, which says the whereas the oligotrophic assemblage shows the opposite thing. The interesting thing to notice is that the eutrophic assemblage gives a somewhat sorry. Yep. So eutrophic assemblage gives a somewhat good correlation with that of SST, whereas most of the species used in the oligotrophic assemblage are warm water preferring species. So that indicates that the foraminiferal species assemblage is more dependent ecologically upon the nutrient in the Bay of Bengal rather than the SST. We then wanted to look at the thermocline as well, how it is, and water column stratification is getting affected by the some monsoonal change. So we selected the Ruber as a mixler representative, residence Ruber, and Butte as a thermocline representative, and we took delta delento value, which we subtracted the delento value of 0. Delito value of deuterative from the Ruber. The Ruber data has been obtained from the Clemens et al. 2021, and we obtained the data of delitino of deuterative, and what it represents the delta delitino for just schematics. That if the summer monsoon is strong, then it will have a shallow mix layer because of the stratification and because of low mixing, and the thermocline assemblage will increase and delta delitino will be low. And at the same time, weak summer monsoon, the mixing will be more, and weak stratification, delta delitino will be high, the mixed layer assemblage will increase. At the same time, if we go to the strong winter monsoon, we see that the strong wind induced convective mixing, the weak stratification and delta delitino will be high, and it will be opposite during the weak winter monsoon. So we also looked at the mixed layer and thermocline assemblies. We used these species, Bullardis, Sacculifer, Ruber, and all to create a mixed layer assemblage, and the thermocline species to create a thermocline assemblage. And we see that here is the thermocline assemblage, and here is the mixed layer. And what we see is that thermocline assemblage, the peaks are mostly during the interstadial times, and low peaks are during the stadial times throughout, and exactly opposite for the mixed layer species also. That indicates a more stratification of the Bay of Bengal during the interstadial times and less stratification during the stadial times. When you look at the deuterative, we in the previous slides we saw that how deuterative is related to the chlorophyll maxima. So when you look at the deuterative, that also shows a high value during the interstadial times and low value during the stadial times. And the same goes to the delitino seawater of Clemens et al. Published by Clemens et al. And the SST published by them. They also are more during the interstadial times. We saw that stratification was more during the interstadial. The delitino of seawater signifies low salinity, and that low values are during the interstadial times. What more we see that as we saw in the summer monsoon thing, the thermocline assemblage also increases continuously till the present after the post MPT period, after the MPT. So again, we wanted to look at the delta delitino also, and we see that there is a high variability before MIS 25V, that is the pre-MPT and early MPT times, and there is a very low variability during the post-MPT times. So one thing is that in the post-MPT time, more high value of delitino during the interstadial times, that also signifies stronger stratification during the interstadials. The other thing is why this there is low variability in a post-MPT might be because of two things. It could mean that there is very low stratification during the summer, means interstadials, or there is very high stratification during the stadial times. So if we look at these lower peaks, we see that these lower values have comparatively increased. That means the delta delitino has been increased in the stadials compared to that of in the pre-MPT periods. So that indicates that this low variability because of intensification and more stratification during the interstadial times. So we also compared our data with, we included the data published by Nielsen et al. 2022, and this when we show a continuous increase. There is a data gap here. So we see that there is an increase in delta dilution value also, which is what we are saying, which is similar to that of thermocline assemblage increase, which means that the summer monsoon has increased in the post-MPT period. When you look at the delta del published by Bolton et al., which is much south of the Bay of Bengal and where the freshwater influx is much less, that also show an increase in the modern times, average increase in the delta del signifying the same. We also looked at the periodicity, how the periodicity is behaving with respect to different with the Indian monsoon system, and we see that the summer monsoon here is more affected by the precision cycle, whereas the winter monsoon is in post-MPT period more affected by the eccentricity cycle, the 100 kilo one. We don't see a clear-cut change from 41 kilo cyclicity to the 100 kilo cyclicity, but what we see is that the 100 kilo cyclicity in all the proxies, when we come to the post-MPT period, the significance level is increasing. So that means probably the 41 kilo to 100 kilo cyclicity change, I forgot to mention, we have taken the 925 as a boundary because here, our data suggests a significant change after that. So what I was saying, what it means is that probably the 41 kilo to 100 kilo cyclicity transition occurred a little earlier than in the Bay of Bengal and not at what suggested means MPT boundary. So for that, we might need a longer record to know that. And here also periodicity, we took thermocline assemblage and delta del. And when we take the del ND20, as expected, it shows a clear-cut change from 41 kilo cyclicity to the 100 kilo cyclicity because it captures the sea volume change signals, whereas the monsoon proxies, what we discussed, doesn't show that. And again, here the thermocline assemblage also show a 23 kilo precision forcing and as well the delta del. So we suggest that the post-MPT summer monsoon in the Bay of Bengal has been more controlled by the precision forcing. So this all right now. I'm working more on a quantitative approach towards the whatever I have discussed about, and we will be reconstructing, covering a time period of this much, and we're taking a proxy, visual proxies and boron isotope to construct the quantitative reconstruction of the surface water properties. So these all are my summary. I have already discussed them. So the main results are the absolute abundance of planktic foraminifera is not dependent on the productivity. It's more dependent on the dilution and I would say not dependent. It's very less dependent on the productivity and nutrient and more dependent on the dilution and the preservation. And the high relative abundance of bullardis indicate upwelling and deuterate indicates the chlorophyll maxima. There is a dissolution happening in the deeper depths at the Bay of Bengal, and it is mostly a influence of shallow lysozymal as well as superlysozymal dissolution happening due to high amount of bacterial respiration. And during the last 1.45 million years, the summer monsoon was stronger during the stadials, and winter monsoon was stronger interstadial is winter monsoon during the stadials. And also the summer monsoon increased continuously, and as both can be seen from our summer monsoon proxies and thermocline stratification proxies as well. And during the post-MPT period, the winter monsoon was mainly controlled by the eccentricity forcing. However, the summer monsoon was affected by the precision. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So let's see if we have any questions. I have a question actually. So people have been noting for some time now that the summer monsoon proxies in the oceans compared to, say, terrestrial proxies don't correlate very well, because some are related to more rainfall, and others to wind. And I was wondering, your summer monsoon assemblage, is that linked to salinity or to upwelling or to runoff? What's the most important control that you think?
So our summer monsoon assemblage include many species, which has been, we first observed two things. From the sediment trap data in the Bay of Bengal and also the recent sediment studies, which all species are increasing during the summer monsoon time, the seasons, and which all species are more during the winter monsoon time. That is the first thing came into preparing the summer monsoon assemblage. Also the wind proxy, as you're saying, the boulevardies we have used, that is used as an upwelling indicator. But the overall summer monsoon assemblage is based on that what species is present more during what season.
Okay, thank you. So Ed Hathorn has a question. Ed, do you want to ask your question? Okay, he wants me to ask his question. He's asking, how much dissolution influence do you expect at 1,400 meters depth at the IODP site U1446 in the Bay of Bengal?
Yeah, so we saw that the dissolution is happening, means there is a starting point at 1,000 meters, and after that the dissolution is happening. So it's at 1,400 meter depth, the dissolution will be compared to low if we see to that of, compared to that of 1,000 meters depth, we see that lysocline is happening. So if it had been like little say upper boundary, then could be the dissolution would reflect what I will say. The dissolution signature would be more in the IODP samples we are collected from there. I hope I was able to answer.
So do you think that those drilling sites are in good locations to look at the Bengal fan? Or where, if I gave you the JOIDES resolution tomorrow, where would you go to get a good monsoon record for Eastern India?
So if we look at the Western Bay of Bengal, definitely will be a good place because of the high sedimentation rate, but we'll choose a little shallow depth compared to avoid the dissolution effects. If we see the dissolution studies, it's a much recent study we did. So on the basis of that, I would say we should, for the safe purpose, we should choose a site at a shallow depth.
So Pallavi Anand has a question. Do you want to ask your question, Pallavi?
Yeah, I could. Thanks, Sudhir. And that was a nice talk. I was just wondering, how do you comprehend your assemblage signal to be affected by dissolution, particularly when it's happening on glacial interglacial time scale?
Yeah, so definitely, if there is dissolution, it would affect the assemblages also. So here, as I said before, also in this answering to Dr. Hathorn, that the dissolution is we are seeing a signature of the dissolution at 1,000 meters. So more prominent dissolution happening much down to that. So in this, with this regard to the sample set from IODP 1446, the dissolution signature will be low. So we don't we don't expect a much effect of the dissolution happening there on the assemblages we have studied for the U1446 samples. Thank you.
Good. So, anyone else?
I'll let others ask, otherwise
please,
I'll follow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and no, I was just curious. There were a couple of other things that was kind of wondering in my head, really. One thing being, so these seasonal changes that you have captured, what was your resolution of the sample that you have captured these seasonal variability? I was just wondering about it because I couldn't work it out from the points I was trying to look at.
Are you talking about the core samples or the?
Yeah. So what were your resolution
of the core samples?
Yeah, in terms of age.
That is 2 kilo.
Every 2 kilo.
Sorry, no, 4 kilo. I apologize for that. 4 kilo.
No, that's so following on from there. So if you are having a 4 kilo year sampling, and I assume each of your samples would have at least time resolution of at least hundreds. Is it 2 centimeter sampling? So how do you comprehend, for example, these reversal of strength of monsoon could be, happening on a much shorter time scale? So how would you comprehend that your, cumulative signal of several hundred years? And what can we learn from perhaps more, a kind of frequency of change in these monsoon strengths? That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
So I agree to that. I agree to that. That more high resolution studies will reflect much more on the short-term time interval changes. But here we are looking at a much longer scale. So my focus was on a longer scale, and in that long-term scale, if there is any stadial interstitial variability. Obviously, if we want a more stratified or exact means 100, as you say, referred that 100-year changes, then we need more high resolution studies from different intervals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Well, if not, I hope everyone will join me in thanking Sudhir for his very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
And I would like to remind you all that there is a talk next week by Praveen Mishra. Praveen, I haven't got his title yet, but it's coming. And but it's not at the same time, it's at the earlier schedule, Schedule B. So come back next Wednesday, but earlier in the day, and you'll get to hear some more about Asian monsoon. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sudhir.
Thank you for allowing me.
Thank you.